Last time we spoke about the first phase of the 100-Regiment offensive. On August 20th of 1940, forces launched the Jiangtai campaign, part of the Hundred-Regiment's offensive, aiming to disrupt Japan's transport network and thus weaken its cage and strongpoint defense. Orders from the 8th Route Army split tasks. The Jinjiajie military region attacked the eastern Jiangtai line. The 129th Division struck the western section, and the 120th Division hit the Tongpu Railway and the Kunli Highway. Success was to be judged by the damage inflicted on the Jiangtai line. Preparations were conducted under strict secrecy. Reconnaissance teams mapped Japanese strongholds with help from villagers. Communities stockpiled grain, ammunition, and tools and trained for demolition, including heating and bending rails. At night, units infiltrated stations and villages, seized positions that destroyed bridges, power lines, roads, and mines across multiple columns. By early September, the Jiangtai line and related transport routes were severed, isolating strongpoints and hindering reinforcement. This episode is the 100 Regiment Phase 2. Well, hello again and welcome back to the Fall Rise of China podcast. I'm your dutiful host, Craig Watson. But before we begin, I want to remind you all, this podcast is only made possible through the efforts of Kings and Generals over at YouTube. Perhaps you want to learn a bit more about the history of Asia? Kings and Generals has an assortment of episodes on the history of Asia, and so much more. So go give them a look over at YouTube. So please subscribe to Kings and Generals over at YouTube, and to help produce this content by checking out www.patreon.com/kingsandgenerals. And don't forget about our sister podcasts over at the Pacific War and Eastern Front Week by Week podcasts, both written and narrated by me. And if after all that you're still hungry for some more history, why don't you check out my personal channel, the Pacific War channel, found over at YouTube, or my podcast series, Echoes of War, found on major podcast platforms. Over in Echoes of War, we just released an episode covering the Siege of Alesia. And if you'd like to further support me, please consider checking out my YouTube membership or my Patreon account at www.patreon.com/PacificWarChannel. By joining either of these, you get access to the exclusive podcast series, which is about 38 episodes and ongoing at this point, get early access to all the content I make, and voting rights to subjects I will tackle next. During the second phase, the 100 Regiment's offensive stopped being a single burst of action and became a sustained attempt to keep the Japanese occupation system off balance. More regiments entered the fighting until, by the scale of the commitment on the map, 104 regiments were involved. This matters because it changes what the campaign actually was. It's not merely a set of raids, but an effort to broaden pressure so that the enemy could not concentrate everything in one place at one given time. Years later, Peng Duhui, the commander closely associated with the 100 Regiment's offensive, described how the entry of these units felt as spontaneous. And that word can sound mysterious, so it helps to interpret in an operational term. Spontaneous here does not mean unplanned chaos. It means that once the offensive logic took hold, once units saw that the Japanese movements and control were being disrupted, local commanders and regiments felt empowered to join the fight without always waiting for the 8th Route Army headquarters to issue fresh detailed instructions for each smaller step. In other words, the campaign became something like an expanding network. Local success and shared strategic perception fed into more participation across regions. Strategically, the campaign was guided by political and military guidance issued on September the 10th of 1940 by the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party. That instruction tied current operations to the earlier political military framework of the July 7th Declaration and the July 7th Decision. The instruction argued that the moment mattered. It called for focusing main efforts on striking the Japanese army during a period when unity was being strengthened. It specifically urged that, based on the experience of the North China 100 Regiment's offensive, Communist forces should organize one or more planned large-scale offensive operations in Shandong and central China. In North China, the instruction pushed for expansion into Japanese army areas that had not yet been attacked, because the battlefield effect of the campaign was not only measured in immediate battlefield outcomes, but in reducing enemy-occupied space, enlarging base areas, breaking through blockade lines, and improving combat effectiveness. Within the directives it was said, "Striking the enemy and attacking our allies is the general policy of military operations at present." This represented the harsh shorthand for the operational reality, The campaign had to prevent Japanese occupation from appearing stable and manageable. If the occupation system could treat insurgency as localized trouble, it would recover quickly. If instead occupation became dangerous in multiple places at once, requiring constant defense, constant movement, and constant reinforcements, then the Japanese would be forced into a defensive posture that undermined their ability to exploit control. On September the 16th, the headquarters issued the second phase plan with a clear aim: expand results from the first phase. The headquarters explained the second phase would continue with an emphasis on disrupting Japanese transportation and destroying some strongholds that had penetrated deep into the base areas. And this would reveal the campaign's real background and stakes. The offensive wasn't built around capturing territory in the traditional sense alone. It was built around breaking the system that makes occupation work. In the enemy's logic, their occupation relied on movement. Soldiers needed to move, supplies needed to be shipped, and reinforcement must be routed quickly to wherever the trouble appeared. Transportation infrastructure, roads, railways, bridges, power lines, they all formed the skeleton of control. Strongholds and outposts were the organs that occupied space, but they would depend on that skeleton. If transportation became unreliable, strongholds would become isolated islands. If the strongholds became isolated, the Japanese had to decide between defending each island and spreading themselves thin, or leaving some islands to contain the rest. Either one would result in weakness. Strongpoints, whether forts, fortified villages, gatehouses, or roadblocks, all function as the so-called cage and silkworm system. They were placed so Japanese forces could consolidate inside them, while routes outside were controlled or denied. In that model, even a small disruption could trigger a major ripple effect. When highways or key segments of the rail were repeatedly broken, Japanese units couldn't move cleanly. They had to detour, slow down, repair under threat, or escort repairs with larger forces than they preferred. Every extra hour spent repairing was an hour not spent consolidating. Every detour was a chance for ambush or further sabotage. That strategic framing explained why, even as the campaign broadened, different regions emphasized different battles. The Jinchaji military region mainly fought the Lailing campaign. The 129th Division mainly fought the Yulao campaign, and the 120th Division focused on attacking the Tongpu Railway. They were not separate stories. They were just different methods of attacking the same underlying vulnerability: the occupiers' ability to move, reinforce, and coordinate. Within the Jinchaji sector, the stakes were especially sharp around Laiyuan and Lingqiu. The Japanese forces stationed in Mongolia had occupied those areas and penetrated deeply into the northwestern parts of the Jinchaji border region. Japanese strength around these positions included elements of the 2nd Independent Mixed Brigade and the 26th Division, totaling some 1,500 men plus more than 1,000 puppet troops. The presence of puppet forces mattered not only for manpower, but because puppet troops supported the occupiers' local control apparatus. They served as locally sourced enforcers, scouts, guards, and administrative adjacent security. Removing or weakening them was part of disrupting occupational credibility and local stability. Now, because the Japanese had been attacked in the first phase, they did not respond by retreating in passivity. They increased troops at each strongpoint. Laiyuan City alone was reinforced to around 500 men, and the Japanese strengthened fortifications and stockpiled food and ammunition. This meant that the defenders were preparing for a second round, not a sudden surprise raid, but a sustained threat that would test their ability to endure isolation and keep their network intact. Under these conditions, the Jinchaji leadership decided to mobilize forces for the Lailing campaign, beginning at around 10 o'clock on September the 22nd. Here the background and stakes showed the campaign's timing and tactics. The objective was not to, quote, beat the defenders in open battle. It was also to attack in ways that would prevent consolidation. By pushing on county areas and surrounding strongholds immediately, the attackers aimed to force the defenders into reactive modes, closing gates, shifting forces into defensive positions, and preparing for fights that would consume time and ammunition. The right wing launched a fierce attack on Laiyuan County and the surrounding strongholds. After a night of hard fighting, the east, west, and south gates were taken, and the Japanese troops retreated into the city. Taking gates mattered because it compressed space. It turns a wider defensive perimeter into a narrower, more concentrated posture. It also created a psychological and operational trap. The defenders who retreated into the city would survive longer as a fortified concentration, but their ability to conduct aggressive movements outside the walls and their ability to receive reinforcements through many approaches had become quite limited. During the night of the 23rd, the 2nd Regiment, supported by a battalion of the 1st Regiment, some artillery, attacked Sangjia village, described as an important enemy stronghold on the Leiyuan-Yixian Highway, roughly 10 kilometers east of Leiyuan City. Highways are not just routes. They are corridors that connected the strongholds to each other and supply lines. By capturing a stronghold on one of these highways, the campaign attempted to break a portion of the corridor network feeding the city. The attackers annihilated most of the enemy and captured the village. At the same time, the 3rd Regiment attacked Dongtuanbao, northeast of Leiyuan City. By the night of the 24th, they had taken the surrounding fortifications and forced the remaining enemies into only a few houses within the village. Then on the 25th, the enemy burned their weapons, supplies, and food that was stored in the strongholds, and they prepared for a breakout. That detail revealed a key stake of the stronghold warfare. The defenders believed that they could not hold and could not escape. They had to destroy the supplies rather than let the attackers seize them intact. It was a grim tactical psychology, destroying stores that could deny the enemy immediate benefit, even if it reduced the defenders' chances of future endurance. When the attackers launched another fierce assault, the remaining defenders, with no hope of escape, threw themselves into the flames and they simply perished. The event underscored the close options nature of battle. The stronghold system was being compressed until breakouts became impossible. On the 26th, outer right-wing units, together with the 9th Regiment of the Pingxi Military Subdistrict, captured 13 strongholds, including Taohuabao, Bailubao, Jijiazhuang, Xinzhuang, Beikou, Saibeitou, Baishukou, Zhongzhang, Wangxidong, Liaojiazui, Zhongzhaiyu, Baishufo, and Jinjiajing. And just a little side note, I did receive a few comments recently from some Chinese audience members who, they're basically letting me know, I understand that my pronunciation of Mandarin is kind of rough. I am trying to improve. I'm a little bit limited. I am absolutely not a fluent speaker. I mean, that's obvious. I'm using basically Google Translate to phonetically say most of this. But I am now accepting some help from a friend, and hopefully it'll get a bit better, so please bear with me. I'm trying to improve. Now, capturing these strongholds and clusters had a strategic function. It didn't just remove personnel. It interrupted local control geography. It actually made it quite harder for the defenders inside the city to extend influence outwards and harder for them to create any new safe points for movement. But the Japanese did what well-prepared occupiers could do. They reinforced at the most important time and the most important place. On the 2nd day after the start, Japanese reinforcements began from Jiangjiakou and other locations. Roads had not been completely destroyed, so the Japanese were able to advance rapidly. This became a major background lesson for the 2nd phase. The 1st phase had demonstrated the power of sabotage to disrupt Japanese movement. But by the time the 2nd phase of the campaign began, the Japanese were not ignorant. They were learning. Where sabotage had fully severed roads, reinforcements would be delayed or routed into danger. Where sabotage remained incomplete, reinforcements would arrive quickly, changing the battle's character from attack dominant to defense dominant. By noon on the 28th, over 3,000 Japanese and puppet troops arrived in Leiyuan City, most by car, supported by 20 tanks and 4 aircraft. This mechanized support was not just extra firepower. It was a statement about how the Japanese aimed to retain control. Tanks and aircraft increased defenders' ability to resist assaults and keep morale from collapsing. Under these conditions, the right wing found it quite difficult to launch a favorable offensive. So the Jinjiaji leadership shifted the offensive focus to the Lingqiu area, rather than forcing the original plan to continue against reinforced mechanized defenses. The first step was to eliminate enemy strongholds between Lingqiu and Hunyuan. The second step was to seize enemy strongholds along a line from southeast of Daying to Shantangbao, and in the mountainous areas north of Daying and Shahe. This shift highlighted a core strategic principle. When a target became too fortified, the offensive would still succeed simply by moving the pressure elsewhere, aiming to break the enemy's network of strongpoints and keep forcing them to respond across larger spaces. On October the 2nd, the headquarters ordered the main force of the right wing to concentrate in the area east and southeast of Layuan. Part of the force was assigned to monitor and contain the enemy in Layuan, while the 1st and 2nd Regiments were placed under the left wing's command and then joined the left wing in combat. This relocation reflected their operational adaptability. If a city became a fortress, small units may be better employed as containment, tying down defenders, while the main effort moved to seize other stronghold lines where the Japanese might still be vulnerable. The fighting continued with tactical attacks that showed how the strongpoint warfare unfolded in the field. On the night of October the 8th, the 1st Battalion of the 1st Regiment launched an attack on the 2nd Regiment, while a portion of the Japanese army in Nanpoto were attacking it. The attackers broke into the enemy lines, annihilated most of the enemy, and then drove the rest off. At the same time, the 1st Battalion of the 6th Regiment captured Changpongling, and the Japanese forces in Qingxiyao fled in panic. There were also some actions taking place in Jinfangjian by the 3rd Battalion of the 6th Regiment, and this happened on the night of the 9th. And there was mention that the 26th Regiment entered Huangtai Temple on the night of the 8th while attacking between Lingqiu and Guangling. Again, if you were to look at all of this on a map, it would look like pure chaos. But these events weren't random. They were simply repeated attempts to keep dismantling the enemy's ability to maintain a functioning strongpoint chain. Each captured stronghold reduced the enemy's ability to create and secure corridors. Each panic-driven retreat increased their time burden. This would further cause them to break down in communication between local nodes. Even when the battle remained fierce and deadly, the changes in tempo would accumulate into operational outcomes. The Lailing campaign lasted about 18 days and produced concrete results. Killed and wounded over 1,000 Japanese and puppet troops. There was the capturing of nearly 50 Japanese and 237 puppet troops, and the leaving of about 1,419 casualties for the 8th Route Army. The losses showed the campaign was not a clean victory by any measure. It was rather expensive. But the operational logic, disrupting and strengthening the occupational zone, capturing strongholds, and forcing enemy reinforcements to concentrate, was consistent with the second phase's broader mission. Support for the Lailing campaign came from the Zhejiang military region through the Longqiu, Hejian, Dacheng, Suning campaign from October the 1st to the 20th, simultaneously sabotaging the Changshu, Deshi, Baining, and Jinpu railways. This is where the background and stakes became especially clear. The Japanese, even when they were defending in one area, had to move elsewhere to respond. When you attack multiple transportation lines and strongpoint zones at the same time, this prevented the enemy from solving one problem cleanly before moving to the next. This caused the enemy to chase multiple fires, as they say. After the Hundred-Regiment's offensive began, Japanese forces in the Zhejiang area moved west to reinforce in some cases, but they were also tied down on important transportation lines. That relative weakening meant defenses in Zhejiang's interior became weaker, creating space where a larger contest could occur. Zhejiang decided to deploy 10 battalions, totaling more than 8,500 men from the 18th, 23rd, and 30th Regiments across the left wing, center, and right wing roles, fighting in the area. The plan was not only to attack, it was to manipulate where the Japanese had to respond. The two wing units would contain and draw the Japanese forces away from the central Renhe-Dasu zone, and then the central unit would break into that central area to open the situation up. In other words, the right wing would pull them in, and the center would punch them. The Renhe-Dasu battle began on October the 1st. On the left wing, the 18th Regiment entered the area east of the Zhulang River and west of Hejian and Ranzhou, capturing Lianjiazhang, Dongguxian, and Liangcuan between October the 2nd and the 6th. By the night of the 7th, Japanese troops at the strongholds, including Yu Huangmiao, Fang Liubao, and Liao Shansu, fled in a panic. It was another reminder that once the stronghold cohesion fractured, the enemy's ability to endure would simply drop. On the right wing, the 30th Regiment operated with 4 battalions east of Dacheng and the Xia River, capturing a series of strongholds including Liminju, Dongzhongzhu, Xiugeju, Siliuzhuang, Zhangzhongzi, and Qiansuan, while engaging in road breaking and ditch digging. These actions showed the campaign's methodology, not just its targets. Even when the opponent could be fought directly, sabotage and engineering measures could amplify the damage by reducing mobility and forcing time-consuming repairs. The central unit, the 23rd Regiment, had 2 battalions crossing the Hutao River northward. On October the 1st, they ambushed more than 100 Japanese troops coming from Xiangjialin to seize grain, killing more than 90 of them and capturing all their weapons. On October the 9th, they ambushed the enemy from Liaoguzhuang to Laitan, annihilating 20 Japanese and puppet troops. The ambushes illustrated a second background principle. The occupiers needed sustenance and extraction operations, and those operations followed routes and patterns. By striking the troops while they were foraging or supplying themselves. From October the 15th to the 20th, the second stage of these operations targeted the east and west banks of the Zaya River, leaving only a small force in the central Renhe River Great Suppression area. On the night of the 19th, the central force captured Banjihe and destroyed a bridge over the nearby Guyang River. On the night of the 16th, the left wing captured Dakudi and the Renqiu Shuman Bridge. On the 18th, they captured a stronghold at Wangpan. The right wing faced a serious enemy situation and could not take major action during one segment. Another reminder that even a planned operation cannot control all battlefield variables. What matters is whether the operation still met its strategic purpose, not whether every segment went perfectly. In the Battle of Renhe-Dasu, Japanese and puppet losses were quite heavy. 805 killed or wounded, and about 3 Japanese and 326 puppet troops captured. The campaign took 29 strongholds. The Zhejiang military region suffered 573 casualties. Strategically, the battle contained enemy forces and effectively supported the Battle of Lailing. Again, support here is not just helping in the same region, but redistributing the pressure, forcing the enemy to allocate troops to Zhejiang. Japanese defenders around Lailing faced more difficulty maintaining overall operational coherence. While Jinjiaji and Zhejiang fought around Leiyuan and Lingxiu, a deeper pressure developed in the Taihang-based region through the Yulao campaign, fought mainly by the 129th Division. The background stakes in the Yulao theater were the highway route from Yangchuan through Pingding, Hushun, Liaoxian, and Yushe, described as the deepest penetration route through which the Japanese had penetrated the Tahang base area. The Japanese tried to extend this road southwest and connect it with the Baijin Railway through Wuxiang, aiming to split the Tahang area and deploy forces flexibly along the Jiangtai and Baijin lines. This was about strategic mobility and operational geometry. A road connection wasn't just for transport. It reshaped where the enemy could exert pressure and how quickly they could shift forces from one axis to the other. The Yulao section measured about 45 kilometers and included 8 strongholds: Yushe, Yangbi, Wangjing, Guantou, Pushang, Xiaolingdi, Xiexiang, and Liaoxian. These were guarded by the 13th Battalion of the Japanese 4th Independent Mixed Brigade. A line of strongholds along a highway in the occupiers' version of the corridor defenses enabled them to keep movement inside a protected chain. If that chain was cut, their movements would become vulnerable, and the deep penetration routes would turn into a dangerous liability for them. Back on September the 22nd, the 129th Division issued basic orders: launch a surprise attack to eliminate the enemy from Yushe to Xiaolingdi, recapture strongholds, destroy the highway, and then press forward towards Liaoxian. This was a textbook example of how the offensive combined surprise, seizure, and destruction. Surprise prevented the defenders from organizing a coordinated response. Seizure eliminated their nodes. Highway destruction prevented them from restoring their corridor quickly. The assault began on the night of September the 23rd. On the 24th, the left wing captured Yangbi and Wangjing, while the right wing captured Pushang and Xiaolingdi. By the 25th, Yushe and Yuchang had fallen as well, leaving only the enemy at Guantou on the Xiaolingdi-Yushe line, who were still resisting. Concurrently, detachments attacked the related axes. The Pingliao detachment captured Hanwang town north of Liaoxian. The Qinbei detachment sabotaged roads and attacked frequently, pinning Japanese forces around the Wuxiang and Baijin routes. On the 26th, the 129th Division ordered part of their right wing to continue besieging the enemy at Guangtou, while the main force and the left wing moved east to recapture Liaoxian and eliminate the reinforcements coming in. At dawn on the 27th, the right wing attacked Shixia west of Liaoxian and captured it that very night. On the 28th, the left wing reached near Majiao in preparation for an attack on Liaoxian that night. Then battlefield logic reasserted itself. The Japanese did not sit idle once their corridors were threatened. Troops from Hushun and Wuxiang reinforced Liaoxian and Guangtou, respectively. The 8th Route Army headquarters ordered the Liaoxian attack to be halted. Some forces were to contain the enemy advancing south from Huxian, while the main force moved to the Hangyagtou and Guanjinao areas to prepare and annihilate enemy reinforcements arriving from Wuxiang. This decision revealed a deeper stake at play. Even if an army were to seize such targets, it had to avoid exhaustion and needed to avoid allowing the enemy to convert a partial tactical loss into a larger opportunity. Headquarters essentially chose the operation's survival path, shift from capturing more nodes to annihilating the reinforcements that would otherwise restore the corridor. Following said orders, the 129th Division attacked Guangtou and then took it by about 12 o'clock at night on September the 29th. The enemy reinforcements had moved through ambush terrain. They were clashing with communist formations in an engagement where aircraft coverage and terrain allowed the enemy to seize some high ground and resist stubbornly. The battle lasted about 2 days and 1 night, with heavy casualties on both sides. It's important to note that the offensive could still have destroyed the corridor nodes, but the enemy's ability to bring aircraft support and seize terrain meant that the destroy and move on approach wasn't always enough. Sometimes momentum had to be rechanneled into another kind of contest, one closer to a blocking ambush than a battle endurance. By the evening of October the 1st, more than 500 Japanese troops from Liaoxian broke through the right wing's blockade and approached near the left wing's command post. The left wing was ordered to withdraw from the battle. Headquarters then assessed that Japanese troops from Liaoxian and Wuxiang had joined and that more than 1,000 troops from Yangchuan had reached Hanwang town north of Liaoxian. Combined with the 129th Division's exhaustion and heavy casualties, headquarters decided to end the Yulin-Liaoxian campaign, not because the offensive had no value, but because the risk of allowing the enemy to sweep the Taipei area could outweigh further gains. The determination of the campaign illustrated the stakes that were often overlooked. In insurgency-style campaigns, operational survival is part of success. The second phase did not merely chase targets. They sought to transform conditions so that the enemy would have to spend strength defending a failing network. If continuing a battle risked letting the enemy regroup into a larger counteroffensive that clears base zones, then ending becomes strategic. Now, while the 129th Division wrestled with corridor defenses around Liaoxian and Guangtou, the 120th Division pursued a transport-centered strategy against the Tongpu Railway, because the railway disruption was not a supporting detail, it was the main axis of pressure. Back on September the 12th, the 120th Division issued an action plan for the northern section of the Tongpu Railway, deciding to attack Ningwu and the Xinxian sections, with an emphasis on the section between Ningwu and Dianyoujuan, starting on September the 20th. The timing of this plan showed that they were trying to synchronize with broader operational pressure. Rail sabotage required engineering preparation and coordination across multiple units, and the campaign sought to create disruption when the enemy would be most vulnerable. On September the 14th, the 358th Brigade left its base west of Liaofan and crossed the Jinglu-Yantian Highway to the north. They assembled at Majiagou on the 16th, and then launched an attack on Tomaying using their 3rd Detachment. At around 12 a.m. on the 18th of September, that detachment attacked Toma Camp, while the 7th and 8th Regiments attacked reinforcements. Fighting would continue until the following morning when more than 40 Japanese soldiers from Ninghuabao reinforced Tomao Camp. Once reinforcements reached Xianjai village, they were surrounded and annihilated. On the 20th, around 200 Japanese soldiers from Yangchuanling went to Lian village to counterattack. The 716th Regiment attacked at around 2 p.m., and by the dawn of the next day, the enemy had fled back to Yangchuanling. These battles were more than local clashes. They served as a background logic of the Sabotage campaign overall. Before destroying railway infrastructure, you needed to reduce the enemy's ability to respond instantly. Fighting reinforcements and counterattacks cleared the window of time. Those windows could be used to sabotage tracks, bridges, and related installations. If sabotage occurs under active reinforcement pressure, the enemy could repair things quickly or trap the sabotage teams. If sabotage occurred after the enemy's response capacity was disrupted, repairs would become much slower, and the operational effects would last much longer. Parallel operations reinforced this logic. On the night of September the 16th, the independent 1st Brigade crossed the Fen River on its eastern side. On the 18th, it was learned that more than 400 Japanese troops had attacked the Yanbei detachment at Yangchuangling, but returned to Shangjiang after failing to find them. The brigade then chose to encircle and annihilate the enemy rather than chase them endlessly. The attack began at around 1 p.m. on the 18th and lasted until the early morning of the 19th. The main force withdrew to sabotage the railway, while the remaining enemy retreated to Yangchuangling. Then engagement inflicted about 105 casualties on the independent 1st Brigade, while killing or wounding approximately 200 Japanese. Once the blocking threat was removed, units then quickly moved to sabotage actions along the Tongpu Railway. The sabotage itself proceeded systematically. On the night of September the 22nd, the 4th Regiment of the 358th Brigade, attached to the division's engineering company, and the division's Special Service Regiment, advanced to the area between Duanjialing and Xuangong to sabotage several sections of the Tongpu Railway. At the same time, the 2nd Regiment attacked Jituen, and the 715th Regiment attacked Xinkou and Luobanjai. On the night of the 23rd, the 2nd Regiment sabotaged the railway south of Xinkou, while the 715th Regiment sabotaged it north of Xinkou. On the night of the 25th, the 715th Regiment then sabotaged between Danyoudan and Xianggang. The independent 2nd Brigade also sabotaged several railway sections between Shaoxian and Ningwu. After about 6 days of sabotage operations, the 120th Division again caused the Tongpu Railway to be interrupted. The background stakes were pretty straightforward here. The railway interruption forced the occupiers to do repair work, requiring escorts and rerouting. During the second phase, when the Japanese were already under immense pressure across multiple theaters, the need to continuously handle repairs reduced the capacity for offensive operations and for rapid reinforcements to any single contested point. By connecting all of these threads, the Laiyuan and Lingqiao strongholds, Renhudasu containment and road breaking, and the Yuliao highway corridor fight and repeated Tongpu Railway sabotage showed the deeper logic of the entire second phase of operations. The campaign aimed to create a battlefield environment where Japanese forces could not enjoy stable mobility and where strong points could not function as reliable cages. Transportation disruption isolated strongholds, stronghold destruction, and capture shrank the enemy's local control points. Highway and rail sabotage forced the Japanese to defend not only troops and walls, but also infrastructure that enabled their coordination. By early October, the second phase was winding down, while a new third phase was developing. Reinforced Japanese columns sought to engage and destroy the 8th Route Army. Over the next 2 months, several fierce counterattacks would occur, and after that, the Hundred-Regiment's campaign would be considered finished. I would like to take this time to remind all of you that this podcast is only made possible through the efforts of Kings and Generals over at YouTube. Please go subscribe to Kings and Generals over at YouTube, and continue to produce this content by checking out www.patreon.com/kingsandgenerals. And don't forget about sister podcasts over at the Pacific War and Eastern Front Week by Week podcast, both written and narrated by me. If after all that you're still hungry for some more history, why don't you check out my personal channel, the Pacific War channel found over at YouTube, or my podcast series, Echoes of War, found on major podcast platforms. If you're looking to support me further, please consider checking out my YouTube membership or my Patreon account at www.patreon.com/PacificWarChannel. By joining either of these, you get access to the exclusive podcast series. It's about 38 episodes and ongoing at this point. Get early access to all the content I make and voting rights to the subjects I will tackle next. After earlier setbacks in the 1930s, the CCP sought national leadership in resistance while maintaining political room to maneuver within an uneasy arrangement with the KMT. By 1941, the strategy shifted towards strong points and transportation warfare. Guerrilla actions were used to fracture Japanese defensive networks and sabotage their logistics. Japanese attempts to consolidate territory through local administration and security practices often provoked the CCP's dual struggle, militarily and politically. As Japanese sweeps temporarily gave the CCP advantages, the situation forced rapid adaptation.